A billionaire leaves his devoted wife for a younger woman, believing he's found true happiness. Years later, his world is shattered when he unexpectedly encounters his ex-wife caring for 4 children who look eerily familiar. The shocking truth behind these children turns his life upside down, leaving him questioning everything he once held dear. As his fortune crumbles and his new life falls apart, he faces an emotional reckoning that could change his destiny forever. The twist at the end will leave you stunned as the billionaire learns the true cost of his decisions. But before we dive in, leave a comment and let us know where you are watching from today. And if this story speaks to you, hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. In the opulent halls of their lavish mansion, David Harrington, a billionaire mogul in his early 50s, sat at his marble desk, flipping through legal documents. His decision had been made. After years of marriage to his wife, Emily, he was ready to move on. Emily, always supportive, had been with him when his fortune was a dream, and now that he had achieved unimaginable wealth, he felt trapped. The spark had fizzled out, and in his mind, the thrill of youth was something he craved once more. Across the room, Emily sat quietly, her eyes fixated on the papers in front of her. The divorce was inevitable. She had sensed David's growing distance, his late-night business trips that didn't involve business at all. She knew about her, Samantha, a woman half David's age, radiant, full of life, everything he believed he needed now. "I never thought it would come to this," Emily whispered, her voice tinged with sadness but surprisingly calm. David looked at her, feeling a moment of guilt, but quickly brushed it off. "It's for the best. We've grown apart," he said, his tone cold, almost rehearsed. Emily signed the papers without a fight. She knew there was no point in trying to hold on to a man who had already left her heart long ago. But what David didn't know, what he could never imagine, was how his world would unravel in ways he couldn't foresee. Fast forward 2 years. David's life had changed dramatically. He was married to Samantha now, living the high life, attending glamorous events, traveling to exotic locations, and indulging in the youth and beauty he craved. Samantha was everything David thought he wanted: carefree, fun, and without the weight of his past life. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. Samantha was demanding. She had grown accustomed to the wealth and power that came with being Mrs. Harrington, and she wasn't afraid to flaunt it. David found himself working harder and longer to maintain their lifestyle, chasing deals and ventures that seemed more and more elusive. Emily, on the other hand, had disappeared from David's life completely. They hadn't spoken since the divorce, and while she had taken a modest settlement, she didn't demand much from him. In his arrogance, David thought she was out of his life for good. One afternoon, while David was rushing to a meeting downtown, something caught his eye. At the edge of a park, there was a familiar figure sitting on a bench, surrounded by a group of children. His heart skipped a beat as he realized it was Emily. But what stunned him even more were the 4 small children surrounding her, quadruplets, identical in their appearance, each with the same striking blue eyes he saw in the mirror every day. David froze. His mind raced. Quadruplets? His quadruplets? Later that evening, David confronted Emily. He found her in the same modest apartment she had moved into after the divorce. There, she welcomed him with an expression of calm strength he hadn't expected. "You never told me," David blurted out, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. "How could you hide something like this from me?" Emily looked him straight in the eyes, unflinching. "You didn't ask," she said simply, her voice filled with a quiet dignity. "You left without caring enough to know what was happening in my life. And when I found out I was pregnant, you had already moved on." David felt a wave of guilt wash over him, but his pride wouldn't let him accept responsibility. "They're my kids. I have a right to know." Emily shook her head. "You had your chance, David. When you left, I was alone, pregnant, and scared. But I raised them. I gave them everything they needed. You don't get to waltz back into our lives just because you suddenly realized what you've lost." David was speechless. His mind spun as the weight of his actions began to crash down on him. As the days passed, David's obsession with the children grew. He wanted to be involved, to claim the family he had unknowingly abandoned. But life had other plans. His business, once a thriving empire, began to crumble. Deals that had seemed like sure bets fell through. Investors pulled out. His marriage to Samantha was deteriorating rapidly. She wasn't interested in being a stepmother to 4 children she had never signed up for. And when the money started to run dry, so did Samantha's affection. The final blow came when David discovered that one of his key business partners had been siphoning money from his accounts for months. His company declared bankruptcy, and David Harrington, the billionaire, found himself penniless. While David's life spiraled out of control, Emily thrived. She had built a life of stability and love for her children, and with the support of close friends, she managed to create a warm, nurturing environment for them. The joy she found in motherhood was all the wealth she needed. Emily had moved on emotionally from David long ago, but when she saw him again, broken, humbled, and lost, she felt a pang of empathy. He had made his choices, but now he was paying the price. David, now stripped of everything he once held dear, sat across from Emily once more. This time, there was no anger, no accusations. Only a desperate man searching for redemption. "I know I made mistakes," David said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I lost everything. But most of all I lost you. And I lost them." Emily looked at him, her heart softened by the man who had once been her husband. "David, you can't undo the past. But you can still be there for them. They're your children too." David nodded, tears welling in his eyes. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that the wealth, the power, and the life he had built had all crumbled because he had failed to cherish the things that truly mattered. As time went on, David slowly began to rebuild his relationship with his children. Though he was no longer the billionaire he once was, he found a different kind of wealth, one that came from being present, from the love of family, and from the humility that comes with losing everything and finding yourself. Emily and David never rekindled their romance, but they found a way to co-parent, giving their children the love and support they deserved. And while David no longer had the lavish lifestyle he once enjoyed, he learned that the richest things in life were the ones money couldn't buy. In the end, David's story wasn't about losing his fortune, but about finding his heart. He had spent years chasing after fleeting pleasures, only to realize that the real treasure was the family he had left behind. And though it took losing everything to understand it, David finally found peace in the life he had once taken for granted.